It was meant to give victims' families peace. No body, no parole. The law rushed through to ensure Chris Dawson, who murdered his wife Lynn, was kept locked up. But what if someone insists they're innocent? It's the concern of former Supreme Court Judge Anthony Wheely, who wants the new law scrapped. He sentenced Keli Lane, who's still in jail because of it. Keli Lane, the aspiring water polo champion who had 3 secret pregnancies. Adopting 2 out, the other, baby Tegan, disappeared. In 1996, just hours after leaving hospital, Keli was seen at a friend's wedding. For a long time, no one knew Keli had a baby girl. But years later, an inquest, then a murder trial.
Did you kill the child?
No, I did not. I did not do anything like that.
Someone else?
No.
What happened to baby Tegan?
Excuse me, give her a bit of space,
Please don't touch me.
Keli always maintained she gave her to the father, Andrew Norris or Morris, in the hospital car park. But police didn't buy it. She was charged with murder. Despite no body, evidence or witnesses, Keli was found guilty in 2010.
In her mind, Keli had nowhere to turn.
She's still in jail today, now the first test of the new no body, no parole law in New South Wales. Justice Anthony Wheely oversaw Keli Lane's murder trial. It was the last before he retired. The former Supreme Court judge and chair of the Centre for Public Integrity joins me. Really nice to see you, Mr. Wheely.
Great pleasure.
You sentenced Keli Lane. Now you're saying let her out.
Yes, but I don't think it's the fact that I was a sentencing judge that drives my remarks. I like to think that I'm looking at this issue quite objectively and without regard to the fact that I was a trial judge and without regard to the fact that I was the judge who sentenced Keli.
So she's the first test of the state's no body, no parole law, which was rushed through at the time of Chris Dawson's verdict. Do you think it was intended for cases like Keli's?
Not at all. I mean, there are a number of reasons for that. First of all, it sprung out of the Chris Dawson case. There was a lot of community outrage over Chris Dawson's trial and what it revealed about his behaviour. And the community at large was responding to that, and the state government in turn responded by saying, right, well, we'll take what is an existing law, but one that can be applied with discretion, and we'll make it mandatory. And we'll say from now on, if you don't cooperate and reveal where the body is, you won't get parole.
So is it the law isn't bad, it's just the fact that it's mandatory, so it applies to all cases?
Yes, I think it's bad because it's mandatory and there's no element of taking into account its retrospectivity. So just to take an example, Keli, if she'd been sentenced to a term of imprisonment that was about a year shorter, she wouldn't have faced this. But she would have been the same person and she would have still been maintaining her innocence and still saying, well, I can't help you locate where this body is.
So she's served her minimum 13 years and 5 months. From all accounts, she's been a model prisoner. But if she doesn't say, this is where Tegan's body is, well, she stays in for another 4.5 years.
Well, she doesn't even have to say that. She could say, look, all I can tell you is I put the child's body in a garbage vehicle as it went past. And
but
that's
what if
I
she
did.
can't say that?
No, but she could make it up,
right.
You see. So this law goes to people who may be innocent and it says to them, you can invent a story which shows that you're cooperating, even though you still maintain your innocence and even though you didn't do it. And that's hardly encouraging, you know, truth and justice in our system.
So what do you think this says about Keli, the fact that she could say that and potentially get out tomorrow, the fact that she's not?
Well, I think it shows that she has maintained her innocence from the beginning. Now, she's a convicted murderer, so the society has to treat her in that way, but she herself, as a person, coming before the parole board, maintains that she is innocent.
So I sat through the inquest as a court reporter many, many years ago and covered the murder trial. You had issues with how the prosecution ran its case and the verdict has always sat uncomfortably with you.
Well, I always accepted the verdict of the jury. I think the trial judge has no discretion in that. He must accept the jury's verdict, and I sentenced Keli Lane to quite a serious sentence, term of imprisonment, because I acted upon the jury's verdict as I was obliged to do. So I don't call in question the jury's verdict. It's more an abstract question. Was I happy during the trial? There are many things I wasn't happy with, but there was nothing I could do about that. The Court of Criminal Appeal held that the verdict was a reasonable one, and I had to accept that as well. But in my heart of hearts, I wondered if I had been the trier of the case, as opposed to just being the presiding judge, I'm not sure that I would have been satisfied of guilt beyond reasonable doubt. But again, I stress, that wasn't my job, it was the jury's job.
So had it been a judge-alone trial?
I may have had some doubts.
And if you have doubts, you then find someone not guilty.
That's if there's a reasonable doubt, then the verdict should be not guilty.
Because you've talked about this case taking an emotional toll on you, that it was harrowing, and it's we never hear judges speak like that.
No, and I think it's fair to say I was criticised for speaking out, and I understand the criticism. Judges generally remain silent, and they should remain silent. But sometimes a situation and circumstances calls for a judge to reveal what he's actually feeling or thinking. And that's something that I don't regret doing. And yes, it did. It was a very profound effect on me, and I felt that I could not do or undertake a criminal trial again, and I did not.
Do you feel sorry for Keli Lane?
No, I don't feel sorry for her in that sense, because, as I say, she was convicted of murder. It was my task to sentence her. I feel sorry for her in this no parole, no body situation, because she's served her sentence. It was a long sentence, nearly 14 years, in prison in very difficult circumstances. She had to give up her child. She had another child who was growing up when she went to prison, and that child has really never known her mother. So yes, I feel sorry for her in that sense, but I feel sorry for her particularly because I believe that had this law not been passed, then she would be back in the community where she belongs.
So when you say this is a law intended for the likes of Chris Dawson, you've got Keli Lane tied up in this. Who else? Are there other cases?
Well, the
that
Lindy Chamberlain case was a very good example of the same thing. Luckily enough, she received the prerogative of mercy and was released. But had she remained in prison and this law were passed, then that would have kiboshed any chance of parole for her. And as we know, she was innocent. So how unfair would that be?
And this is a fundamental problem with the law, isn't it? That if you are innocent, if you're wrongly convicted, if you can't then say, this is where the body is, or help in that process.
Or I've made some attempts to find where the body is.
But you stay in jail.
The thing is, it's mandatory. There's no room for moving. And I think that's what's wrong with it, really.
So all they really need to go in is just fiddle with the language of that law.
Put it back to what it was, which was always a discretionary consideration. So you take Keli Lane, she comes up for parole, you know she's maintaining her innocence, but you also note that she's not telling everyone where the body is. At the same time, you note she's no threat to the community. She's done a term, she's been effectively a model prisoner. If you were balancing all those things together, would you keep her in or let her go? You judge for yourselves. I think the answer's obvious.
And one of the things we know Parole Board takes into account are that the feelings of a victim's family. In this instance, the family want her out.
But she's the family. She's the mother of the child. I mean, the government representative I read in the paper the other day said that the purpose of this law is to grant comfort and solace to the family of the victim, to give them closure. Now, Keli is the family. Does it give her closure by putting her back in jail for another 4 years? It just shows how this law really can't apply to her. It was not intended to apply to her, but because of the way it's worded, it slammed her back inside for 4 more years.
And what breaks my heart is that there is another daughter here. She was 10 when Keli went to jail, and she's now 23 and she just wants her mum back.
I'm sure that's a terrible blow for both Keli and her daughter to be separated for another 4 years. That's pretty tough on both of them, isn't it?
You've put your name to an open letter to the New South Wales Attorney General calling for change. I mean, you would know as a former Supreme Court judge, That carries a bit of weight.
There's a lot of people who put their name to it, people who are more important than I. And I do think that it would be wonderful if the government would just sit down and listen and reflect on cases like Keli's, which are totally wrong for this to be applied to them, and restore the law to what it was before. And so in a case like Chris Dawson's, if he were ever to come up for a parole, it might be quite appropriate to say, well, sorry, we won't give you parole because although you maintain your innocence, the evidence against you was so overwhelming that no one believes that. Keli Lane's a different question. It's always been an enigmatic case. There's always been a question mark over her guilt. And not from my point of view, but from the point of view of other organisations which care about prisoners who are wrongly convicted.
Yeah. So it should be quite simple just to amend the law.
Yes.
Change a few words.
Yep.
What do you think is going to happen?
Well, I fear that governments are stubborn once they've made a decision like this. And of course also, to be fair, family of Lynette Sims would not like to see this law changed. I understand that, and I understand why, how they feel about that. But at the same time, if this law were put back on a discretionary basis, that would still answer their concerns and worries.
You know what, Mr. Wheely, nothing's black and white, is it?
No, I'm afraid not.
And look, I keep going back and thinking about Keli's daughter. I think she deserves her mum back and that it's time, but we really appreciate you coming in.
A great pleasure.
Thank you. And it's now with the Attorney General.